The desert was quiet, too quiet for comfort. The sun was sinking low, turning the sky the color of blood as it slid behind jagged ridges. Shadows stretched across the land, long and thin, like fingers reaching from the grave. Out here, silence didn't mean peace. Silence meant waiting. The land itself seemed to hold its breath, bracing for a storm. Not one of wind and rain, but one of flesh and blood, born from a single act of mercy that would change everything. The rancher didn't yet know the storm was coming. All he knew was the weight of his days, each one the same as the last. His spread was small, hardly more than a weather-beaten cabin, a corral patched with rotting wood, and a few head of cattle that wandered more than they grazed. He was a man carved by the land, tall, broad-shouldered, rough hands hardened by years of labor. His face was creased with sun and wind, his eyes gray and tired. They were the eyes of a man who had buried too many memories. Every morning before dawn, he rose to the creak of his floorboards, stoked the ashes in his stove, and stepped into the cold desert air. His breath steamed as he hitched his horse, checked his fences, and carried water from the half-dried creek. The days were long, but loneliness made them longer. At night, he sat by his fire, the glow dancing on the walls, and listened to the wind push against the shutters. No wife. No children. Just silence and work. He had made peace with it, or at least he told himself he had. But fate has a way of shattering the lives of men who think they have nothing left to lose. It was while hauling water that he heard it, a sound so faint he almost mistook it for a trick of the wind. A whimper, soft and broken, like the cry of a starving pup. He stopped, the rope burning in his palm as he froze, listening. There it was again. His heart quickened. He followed the sound through scrub and sagebrush, each step crunching in the dirt, until he found them. 2 children. They huddled in the shadow of a boulder, skin cracked from sun and hunger. A boy and a girl, no more than 8 or 9, their faces gaunt, their eyes wide with fear. Their hair was tangled, their bare feet raw from walking miles on stone. They looked like shadows of children, more bone than flesh. When they saw him, they pressed together, clutching each other as though the world might rip them apart. The rancher just stood there, his heart thudding. He knew instantly who they were, not by name, but by blood. These weren't settler children. They belonged to the people whose hunting grounds stretched across the desert, people who had warred with settlers, who had lost land and kin, who carried vengeance in their hearts. He swallowed hard, torn in two. He could walk away. He could pretend he hadn't seen them. Out here, nobody would know. Nobody but his own conscience. And conscience was something a man could silence, if he tried hard enough. But then the little girl lifted her hand. Her voice was so faint it was almost air. Water, please. That word struck him like a blow. He saw her lips cracked, her small hand trembling. The boy's eyes glistened with tears he was too proud to shed. Something deep inside the rancher cracked open, something he thought had died long ago. He dropped to one knee, his voice rough. Easy now. You'll be all right. He lifted them, one in each arm, their light weight shocking him, like carrying bundles of sticks. He set them gently in his wagon, pulled off his worn coat, and covered their frail bodies. As he snapped the reins and turned for home, the wind bit his face, whispering a warning he couldn't ignore. He knew this choice had tied his fate to theirs, and somewhere beyond the ridges, eyes would be watching. That night, his cabin flickered with lamplight. He fed the children what little he had, beans, bread, a dipper of water. They ate cautiously, as though afraid it would vanish. When they finally slept on a pile of blankets, he sat by the fire, staring at their small, sleeping forms. "What have you done?" he whispered to the flames. His hand clenched around the cup in his grip. "You've gone and set fire to your own roof." But no matter how he tried to convince himself, the truth lingered in his chest. He could not have left them. Not when they reached for him. Not when their voices trembled with desperation. By morning, word had already begun to spread. When he hitched his wagon and rode into town with the children, every eye followed. Main Street, usually a bustle of boots and wagons, slowed into silence. Men leaned on porch rails, whispering. Women paused with their baskets. A deputy lounging outside the sheriff's office spat into the dust and narrowed his eyes. "What's he doin' with those kids?" someone muttered. Inside the general store, the owner gave him a hard look. "Best think about what you're draggin' into this town," he said as he filled a sack with flour. "Folks say those children belong to a people that won't forgive their loss." The rancher dropped coins on the counter with a metallic clink. "They were starving. I couldn't leave them." The storekeeper leaned forward, voice low. "Kindness can get a man killed quicker than cruelty out here. You best pray you ain't called to answer for this." By the time he left town, he could feel the rumors galloping ahead of him. He drove the wagon hard, every hoofbeat hammering like a warning in his chest. That evening, he saw the first sign of it. Dust rising on the ridge. Dark figures silhouetted against the dying sun. Mounted riders, still and silent, watching. The children tensed, their small hands gripping his sleeve. He felt their fear, saw the recognition in their eyes. Those were their people. But the way the riders watched was not with welcome, it was with judgment. He tried to steady his breath, keeping his eyes forward. They didn't follow. They didn't speak. They only watched, and somehow, that was worse. The next day, the storm broke. He was riding toward town again when he saw them. A wall across the road. 50 warriors, mounted and ready, their faces painted with the colors of war. Feathers lifted in the wind, lances and rifles gleaming in the sun. Horses stamped the dust into clouds. The rancher pulled his wagon to a halt, heart thundering. The leader rode forward. His horse was black as midnight, his shoulders draped in fur. His face was painted with streaks of red and white, his eyes sharp as flint. He raised his spear, blocking the path. For a long, terrible moment, silence reigned. The desert itself seemed to wait. The leader's voice was low, but it carried like thunder. "Return them." The rancher swallowed, his throat dry. His hand hovered near his rifle, though he dared not lift it. His mind raged. If he gave them up, he would live, but what would that make him? He remembered their cries, their hunger, the girl's whispered plea. He had carried them from the edge of death. Could he betray that? The girl clutched his arm, her voice small, trembling. "Don't let go." And those 3 words were heavier than any weight he'd ever carried. Inside, he fought with himself. He was no hero. He was just a man who wanted to live out his days in peace. But now, peace was gone. All that remained was choice. To live by mercy, or to survive by surrender. The leader raised his hand. The warriors shifted. Horses pawed the earth. Rifles gleamed. The air thickened with the promise of violence. The rancher exhaled, sweat dripping down his brow, eyes locked on the leader. His fingers brushed the worn stock of his rifle. Every muscle trembled. One twitch, one heartbeat, one wrong word, and the desert would run red. And then, silence. The world held its breath. The standoff balanced on a knife's edge, the next moment uncertain. Would he give them up? Would he fight? Would blood fall into the dust? The story cut to black, leaving only the echo of hoofbeats and the weight of a choice yet unmade.